Welcome to the first chapter of our webinar series. We are so glad to have you here. And today we will be talking about the application process, and we have Cansu and Murat Ataberk with us. Starting from Cansu, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Cansu and I graduated very recently, about a month ago, and I'm going to do a master's in Università Bocconi in Milan and Master of Science in Economic and Social Sciences program.
And now Ataberk, please.
Okay, so for me, one second, yes. So I also very recently graduated from the same department. We actually graduated from the same high school with Cansu as well. And I'm going to Università Bocconi as well in the same program, Master of Science in Economic and Social Sciences. That's pretty much it for the educational background.
All right, okay, so now I'm gonna take the lead. First of all, I would like to apologize if I make any mistakes because it's been really long since I last spoke English to anyone. So here I go. First, the question that we would like to ask is, how did you decide to do a master's? What made you decide to have master's degrees or doctorate? What was the thinking process? Cansu, if you want, you can go first.
Okay, well, actually, I always wanted to do a master's, well, maybe since high school, I don't know, because I think it's something that differentiates you from other candidates, even when you're applying for a job. It's not only for an academic career, even when you're applying for a job in the private sector, you know, it's something that differentiates you from other candidates, and you learn a lot in the process. You take more advanced classes, you get to write a thesis. So I think it's a valuable experience as well, alongside the benefits.
Ataberk?
This is my part. Okay, so for me, my, let's say, utopian idea of a great life was to study in the university for my entire life, and you know, just graduating from every department possible. But my parents have a certain income and I will have a certain income, so it's pretty much impossible. The closest next thing is to follow a career in academia, I guess. I don't know if it's the correct translation, but anyways, that was my thought process. And I wrote to becoming a member in academia starts with a master's degree. So that's pretty much how I decided to. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, our next question to you is, what do you think are the fundamental skills that should be acquired by the applicant? Cansu, you can go first.
You mean in general or for like the economics masters?
Specifically for the economics masters, yes.
All right, I think, you know, what you can get, you need to learn the economics first, like, you know, you need to get good grades from the economics classes and learn the material well, you know. And then I think you can go on to some more quantitative stuff like math courses and coding. And some research experience is also valuable, because at the end of a master's, you'll be writing the thesis. And if you want to go to academia in the end, of course, a research experience is indispensable. Yeah, I will think a bit more on that while Ataberk talks.
Sure, thank you, Ataberk.
And since Ataberk talks for very long periods of time, she will have plenty of time to think about what she's gonna say. So what differentiates you? To be honest, the first, let's say, requirement is to have a high enough GPA. And that's really important, and it differs a lot from the school, from school to school when you're applying to, because every school has their own threshold in terms of which CGPA they want in their prospective students. So that's one, and to keep in mind that everything you do will be the cherry on top. So this is like establishing the fundamentals of a building, and then you start to build the floors on top. And in certain cases, and that certain case would be me, those extracurricular activities may make up for the low GPA you have and actually allow you to come up with a decent outcome. But as I said, having a GPA is really important. If you're still in, and also something that Cansu forgot to mention is, I think the preparation period is really important, because when you're applying to masters, you will most likely apply to several schools, and these application processes are not possible to finish in 5 minutes or 6 minutes. And you will have a really, let's say, big pile of work to do for each application. So it's really important to start the preparation period at the right time and have a goal, have a plan in mind. If you don't take notes of which schools you are going to, their differentiating points, let's say their TOEFL cutoffs, their GRE requirements, if they have any. This is quite important that I actually have my own Excel document ready. So I will show it to you in the following minutes. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, I have a question before asking our next question. Like, I understand that you need a good GPA or some like research experience, and of course you have to be passionate in that field as well. But like in terms of personality or characteristics, what do you think is necessary for a master's? Because I think like in doctorates, you need to be probably like more determined about what you're gonna do. But do you think that's the case in a master's degree?
Well,
I can just.
no, you start, then I go.
Okay. First of all, we have yet to start our master's education. It's coming in 1.5 weeks, and we will both be in quarantine in Milan. So, like during the master's process, I don't know. We don't know, but I believe that the next 2-3 webinars will be about that topic. So you will be able to ask those participants. But definitely, I think you should be, in economics case, you should be really determined about actually getting into a master's, because all of the professors always say that, like when we are trying to choose which school we are going to apply to, or for other people which school they are going to choose, some of us don't get to choose which school they are going to get admitted to. It's the professors say that if you can do anything while you're doing your master's on a constant basis, then you should reconsider the program you're applying to, because it should be really hard work. To deal with economics is it has the level required to survive, let's say, really jumps from bachelor's to master's, from what we've heard, and that's something to consider. So, for economic students, it's if you're going to a good program in Europe, you should definitely plan like, oh, I want to have master's and work in a bar. Meanwhile, if you're going to a good enough program, that shouldn't be possible. At least that's what we heard. That's what all I'm gonna say.
I would say it would. I don't think it requires as much perseverance as a PhD, because a PhD is something very unstructured by nature. So you get to, you find a research topic and you go through it, and sometimes a great idea doesn't turn out to be a great idea, then you need to start thinking things over again, and you try and make errors and learn. But a master's is essentially more structured. So because in the first 1.5 years you take courses and then you write a thesis, but that thesis doesn't have to be as original as a PhD thesis, naturally. So I think it's a less bumpy road, but of course, naturally, because of what Ataberk said about the mathematics background and stuff, it's challenging, because a regular economics student doesn't get as much quantitative background as maybe an engineering or a mathematics major. And like you need to push for it a bit more. You need to take some more quantitative electives, or maybe learn by yourself to get through it. But it depends on the masters as well, because not all masters are academic masters. Like there are more interdisciplinary masters, or some less quantitative masters for maybe the corporate world. I don't know. Well, it really depends on the program that you're applying to as well.
All right,
It's
thank you.
actually really, I want to elaborate on that. I think it's a really good point because when you're, when we were, I was applying, I thought that, okay, there's this one thing called a master's in economics and that's it. But by nature, there are two opposite ends that your master's degree can end up in. One is the private sector and the other is academia. And actually, at least from my observations, I've observed that schools do define uh, which, let's say, aim they are going to inject to their students, let's say. Um, because some schools will say, okay, this is a really niche program that combines this skill, and this skill. And our aim is to put you in, let's say, a career in investment banking. But also the opposite case might hold. For our case, it's a mix from what I believe. And like in Bocconi, I think you can choose which career path you want to follow. But let's say you go to Toulouse School of Economics, and that's a really heavy microeconomics school. And no, there's no aim, there's no goal to put you in a good place in private sector. They aim you to become really good, pure theoretical microeconomics. So that's something to consider. And professors really do help when it comes to learning what they do, what they aim. That's it.
And many universities like offer multiple programs. For instance, in Carlos Tercero, there's like this 1-year economics program where I'm not sure whether you write a thesis or not, but this is a more private sector oriented master's. Then there's a 2 years master's in economic analysis, which is purely theoretical. So many schools actually do that. So in Bocconi also there's lots of different masters in management, data science, finance. They really differentiate among these.
All right, okay. Cansu, a few minutes ago, you also mentioned like sometimes you, for few masters, not few masters, but some master programs, you need to have taken quantitative courses, right? So my question is like, which courses would be considered as a must in order to apply or get accepted for a master's degree? I know it, as you said now, like it's probably going to differentiate, but at least for your program, like which courses would be considered as a must? Or like in terms of mathematical courses, like do we actually have to take many math courses? What would you say on that?
All right. Well, if you ask the professors, they will tell you, yeah, go up to real analysis. But okay, the thing is, I don't think you need to go up that far for a master's. If you want to go straight into a PhD, then yes. I mean, you need to take abstract mathematics, advanced calculus, and real analysis, maybe even financial mathematics. This is a sequence of courses, and you need to start from maybe the first year to be able to do that, because that's a long sequence. But for a master's, I don't think you need to go that far. So you can take some more abstract courses, improve, you can start with maybe abstract math. If you can manage it, you can take advanced calculus. But don't worry if you can't take real analysis, because the math department, they don't open up courses in the spring semester. So I mean, the courses that open in fall semester don't open in spring semester. So then if you do a semester of Erasmus in fall, for instance, then basically it's just gone. So I mean, so don't push yourself too much. Don't beat yourself too hard. If you think you haven't got enough math courses for a master's, I think you can get some courses improve. And a course in linear algebra is essential, I think. And I think you'll manage. And some coding courses, preferably something in Python. I think they offer that.
I want to ask something in addition to that before you tell us a bit about which econ courses that we have to take in order to apply for a master's. In terms of mathematics, let's say that I'm a student who is planning to apply for a master's degree, but I haven't taken any mathematics courses so far, and this is my last year, let's say. In that case, would we be able to say that my chance of getting into a good master's program is nearly close to zero?
If that was the case, I wouldn't be admitted. I think mine was not like at the last minute, but I can consider that I've taken less courses from math department than probably other Turkish students that got admitted to Bocconi. So I think it's important to denote that there's no one way when you're applying to a master's. For example, like one of my friends approached me. Some of you guys know me, and you know that I never tell my CGPA. It's like a close kept secret. And one of my friends from management department, and she's a really close friend of mine, approached me and said, "Oh, I've just heard that Bocconi has a threshold of 3 point something something." We don't have to consider that because yes, I'm not gonna reveal info even now. But then she was like, "So now I know your GPA," and I was like, "No, that doesn't hold. If what was the case, I wouldn't be admitted." So there's no one clear path, but I think linear algebra is super standard for if you want to get into a good master's program. Differential is good. Anything quantitative based is good. And when they look at your, you ask the question, which course you should take from economics department. The professor answer will be the hardest courses and take them all. But
economic theory or graduate
yeah,
courses.
Exactly that. Yeah.
If you don't know what four horsemen of economics are, it's theory of growth and development, advanced economic theory, game theory, and bargaining theory. Those are like pretty much the hardest four courses offered in the
That was
undergraduate.
my next question. Yes, like, do we have to take those? Because I think like that's one of the few things that we always hear, like, oh, you must take game theory in order to like at least show the administration office that you are actually like willing to do that and you are capable of doing that. So do you think there are any courses that shows that you are ready for a master's degree?
Those four courses, I think they are a good place to start, but you don't have to take them all. You don't you don't have to even take them, but it's a good signal because when you send them your transcript, what happens is, from what we've heard and based on our experience, let's say, and this is actually true, I passed sound design 1 with an A. But of course, the econ professor at Bocconi wasn't like, "Oh, the student is really good at recording sounds. Let's admit him." No, the relevant courses are taken into account. Um, so any quantitative course is good, but I've taken bargaining theory. We actually took it with Cansu Cansu this semester, and it was quite hard work. And I also took growth and development, but I didn't take game theory or nor what was it, advanced economic theory.
All right. Well, I took advanced economics theory and game theory, and I think they look good on the transcript. You know, if you get a good grade, I think it helps. You know, with acceptance letters and funding and stuff. But I mean, they might tell you that you take graduate courses, but again, it's not necessary if you're not applying for directly to a PhD. I don't think that you need to go that far. I think these two would look good, game theory and advanced theory. And others, I think you should take them according to your tastes, because if you want to specialize in monetary economics, then take a class in monetary economics. Like, because you're gonna write in your motivation letter, I want to specialize in monetary economics. Then if you haven't taken any proper macro or finance or monetary class, then, you know, it doesn't really look good. So it also depends on your taste as well.
Okay, so
I
we
think it
talked.
does. I think it does, by the way. It does depend
Go
on your
ahead, Ataberk.
No, I think it's really important something you mentioned. For example, if you're applying to SEMPI, which isn't actually a school but a research institute in Madrid,
Yes.
and if you don't know any macroeconomics, you won't get admitted. It stands for Center for European Monetary Policy Research.
Yes.
Monetary and financial institution. So like if you don't have any monetary or financial background, it's really low chance that you will get admitted. For the same case, if you're applying to Toulouse and you haven't taken game theory or all of your course in microeconomics are low, then yeah, it's really unlikely that you will get admitted to that particular school. So when we are talking, you should always consider that these do change from school to school.
And also program to program as well. If you want to do more finance, then take classes from the management department, or, you know, something more interdisciplinary, go take Pulse or IR courses. Like, it really depends on what you want to do.
Okay, so you're saying that like it's good to signal that you are ready for it, but also you should make sure that you are ready to specialize in what field that you want to proceed. I see. Okay. Thank
It's
you.
optional, not necessary.
Okay, so so we talked a lot about the courses, but aside from all the academic things that we can do, what were the extracurricular activities that you've done in your time? I'm sorry, during your time at Bilkent. Ataberk, you can go first.
My list is quite long. I'm infamous for paying less attention to classes than I should, and paying more attention to extracurricular activities than I should. So, for my case, first of all, if you are applying to an academic program, it may not differ. That's something to consider. Those extracurricular activities might contribute to, let's say, 10%. Or for a certain school, it might contribute 50%. We don't know. But in my case, I did a semester in Management and Economics Community MEC. I did an entire year in Operations Research and a club, and I actually applied for board membership. After I did 1.5 years of board member, I was a board member for 1.5 years in Parkour Bilkent. I'm one of the co-founders of Ero, and I was the president for 2 years, I believe. Before Cansu, I was the president. That can be a way to sum it up. As far as club activities goes, that was it. And also, I am still a research assistant of Repetitive Kaynak. It's been 1.5 years. I did 3 teaching assistantships, one in CS 123, one in Econ 101, and one in Econ 102. And 3 internships. One of them was in Ernst & Young, Ankara branch, and I don't recommend it to anyone. Other one was in İş Bankası, the headquarters of İş Bankası in Levent, Istanbul. And I was at Economic Research Division for 1 month. And in Turkey, I did, and let's say my compulsory internship with Refet Hoca for 2 months, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Cansu?
All right, let me go backwards. I did 2 TA-ships. I taught last semester I taught 222, and like before I went to Erasmus, I taught 101. And also I also did research with Refet Hoca, not the same project, but you know, for about 1.5 years when I was in the 2nd year and half of my 3rd year. And I did, my club activities were, some of them were relevant, some of them were irrelevant in terms of economics. So I was, in my last year, I was in the Trade Master platform, you know, and in my 3rd year, in the 1st semester, before I went to Erasmus, I was the academic responsible for Eru. And in my first 2 years, I wrote for Gazete Bilkent in the arts and culture section. And I also did for 2 years Model United Nations. And apart from that, I like learning foreign languages. You know, I speak 5 for the moment. Yeah.
Okay, then I guess I'm gonna continue with the next question. Mine is pretty similar to what Burcu asked, because you already talked about your internships, the ones that you have already completed. But like, what do you think the importance of an internship is for your application, at least? Because I think like when we look at our resume, let's say while we're applying for other places, it's nice to see those internships, but it's questionable whether it has a real effect on your application.
Well, I didn't talk about internships, so I remembered now. I'll talk about it. So I did 2 internships, like 1 voluntary and like 1 compulsory. The compulsory one, I did it at the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization. And the voluntary one, I did it at Gamma Holding. So I wanted to do 1 in private and 1 in public sector to compare to. And the thing is, I think you don't learn a lot of you don't acquire a lot of knowledge from internships. Well, depends, of course. Maybe Ataberk would say something different, but from my internships, I didn't learn a lot of technical knowledge. What I learned was, I learned how things work, like how people communicate in private sector and in public sector. I had the chance to compare this, like, and what do people do? How is the corporate or the institutional culture? Like how you can get a job, and what do you need to do to get a job in these places? I think, yeah, that's the experience you get. Not very much technical knowledge. I mean, something that is relevant to what you want to study would look good. For instance, again, if you want to specialize in monetary economics, if you did an internship in a central bank, which is not usually possible when you're an undergraduate student, but maybe somewhere, somehow, if you did something like that, it's very valuable. And also some research experience, naturally, if you want to do an academic master's. And if you want to do a master's in finance, and if you do an internship in some investment bank or in the Big Four, again, it depends on the context.
All right, thank you so much.
For me, I think what Cansu said really, one second. Okay. So what Cansu said really holds, even in academic internships. Like for every kind of internships, you learn more on soft skills than rather technical skills. The technical skills is something you acquire mostly in classes. And when I say mostly, I mean like 90% maybe. So internships, I feel like they are more for testing whether you want what area you want your future life to be in. That's pretty much, I think, the goal of internships. And let's be honest, internships in Turkey suck for the most part. They actually do. I've actually found when it comes to technical skills, having like doing an internship with a professor really does help. But apart from those, even in economic research division under the chief economist of İş Bankası, you don't learn as much as you reflect, let's say. But the tricky part is they don't know that. So, and you have to, let's say, don't hate the game, hate the play. Don't hate the player, hate the game, and that pretty much holds. Maybe doing an internship at a really big firm, a global firm, let's say BCG, McKinsey, I know HSBC, ING. Maybe those will, let's say, stand out more. But I feel like your internships do not make you a better candidate instantly. It probably helps if you're just, let's say, under the line of getting admitted or getting rejected. Maybe then they will help. But they don't, from my knowledge, they don't go like, oh, under the economic research division, great, let's take him. No, it didn't work for me that way, let's say.
I would say there's a lot of diminishing marginal returns in case of internships. Like if you have no internship, then it signals that you haven't tried anything outside of academia, or you don't really know what you want to do because you haven't tried anything. But when you like do 1 or 2 internships, then it shows that you're willing to experience and experiment a bit more, I would say.
Okay, but you both said that you've done some research with professors, and can you please talk more about that, Cansu?
All right. Well, ours was not purely economics, so it was more like sociology, history, economics, politics combined, because I was in my second year when I got this project. So Refataja just sent me an email and said, I have this project if you're interested. And I hadn't taken any theory classes or any statistics back then, so it was more qualitative research. And I researched about the economic policies in the Kemalist era and how they were criticized in the 80s, like how they were criticized by the liberals and how they wanted it to be. So that was it.
Okay, thank you, Ataberk.
For my by the way, Gamze and Burcu both know what I did for the let's say summer internship, but Burcu is also a research assistant. I see other assistants in the conference as well. So I did a ton of stuff in this last 1.5 years, but let's say for my compulsory internship, my main task was to review a project which Refet Hoca, Sang Hoca, and Gökçe Hoca, she's a former PhD graduate from Bilkent. Now she's in the Central Bank of Turkey. My job was to check the merge of the data using the data. And yes, I did acquire a ton of skills in data in that period. And I want to denote that it's really questionable how much I contributed, at least in that term, because you get an undergraduate student and you put, I think that project was at least 5,000 lines of code, at least. And there were like 20 different files. My computer wasn't even running most of the, let's say, code. I remember running one for 1 week and showing no progress at all. Afterwards, I did go back and did more stuff on the project. I think it got revised and resubmit from Journal of Finance, which is like apparently huge news because Journal of Finance is the top journal in finance area. That was what my summer internship was my research assistantship was composed of for the compulsory internship. Other than that, we are currently writing, well, how do you call it? If a research assistant is present, can they elaborate on what I'm saying? But we are writing small articles for Sarkaç. It's a small magazine of Bilim Akademisi, Science, how do you say it? Anyways, Science Academy of Turkey for a really bullshit translation. Yeah, but I think what you do progress as you do your research assistantship. So you might want to consider that, doing it long term.
Okay, and sorry.
Do you have another question, John?
Go ahead. I do actually. What kind of research that you've done in your last summer in Bilkent? How did you decide on what institution that you wanted to have your master's degree from, and how did you decide on the program itself? Cansu?
All right. So I decided that I wanted to go into academia when I was in when I was in my second year. So I worked towards that. You know, I planned my courses accordingly and stuff. And like before the application process, I went to some professors and asked like, what programs do you recommend to me? I want to go into academia later on. And I made my applications in line with their suggestions. And, you know, I aimed for top schools. I had a good GPA and I had a good transcript. I also had other activities like extracurriculars, research experience, languages. And like, I was confident, but one problem in Europe is funding. I got my funding, I'm happy. But, you know, the main problem, I think, is not the admission, but the funding, mostly. Because you will get admitted, maybe not to top schools, but you will, you know, to somewhere. But, you know, if you can fund it, then it's great. But if you can't, then, you know, maybe you should push a bit more and aim for a PhD in the United States, because these are funded, really. Masters are difficult to, with masters, it's more difficult to find funding.
I think the funding part is super accurate because I've been struggling with the funding for the last, let's say, 4 months. And it doesn't look, let's say, it doesn't look like it's going to end soon. I will still have nightmares till October, I guess. But yeah, you will get admitted. What professors talk about, oh, Bilkent is such a school with super high reputation. Yeah, that holds. Even if you're an average graduate, you're still way above the other applicants to the university. And how I chose which schools to apply to, exact the same process. I went to my professors and talked with them. And then I also approached through our mentorship program, BEMP. I approach to other graduates and ask them, especially to those who are in US PhD programs, because that's what my aim is as well. So I like bluntly ask them, which in your school, where did your friends graduated from when it comes to master's degree? And compiling those two information, I made my list. I wasn't super confident. I was never confident, and it was a possibility that I would, I may not be admitted to any school. But you do take the risk, and you do the work, and hopefully it pays off, I guess.
Burcu, can I ask something before moving on to the next question about this? So you said like your chance of, as a Bilkent graduate, getting into a master's degree is pretty good, like any master's. But in terms of funding, like that is the problem. What is the situation of scholarship is when you come to, let's say, masters in Europe? Like where can we find actually funding and stuff like that in terms of scholarships?
That can be a webinar series on its own, actually.
Okay.
But to sum up,
That's true.
You differ. Let's say there are bluntly, really, let's say in a general manner, there are three sources of funding usually. One is the school itself, one is the country, and one is an institution, let's say. Or for Cansu's case, at least, you may get funding based on merit as well when you apply, although it's not super common. And there's also a fifth option. The school that you're applying to may have really low tuition fees or none at all. For example, schools in Germany usually have really low tuition fees. Even with the current exchange rate, it comes as an affordable option. But I think schools in France are usually cheaper than the other options. Schools in Netherlands almost never are cheaper, and it's really hard to find scholarships for Netherlands. In Spain, it may depend. I know schools with really low tuition fees and some with really high tuition fees. When it comes to Italy, I don't know any option in Italy besides Bocconi, so I don't think it's wise for me to say it. That's one case. For Italy, let's say there's a government scholarship, but it's more like a tuition waiver. If you're below a certain income level, then the school cannot ask you for tuition fee, and that's precisely what I'm applying to, what I've applied to, and I'm waiting for the result. And also there's TEV, Turkish Türk Eğitim Vakfı. I'm not going to say it in English, of course. And for Germany, let's say they have DAD. There's also Jean Monnet. I almost forgot, but deadlines for Jean Monnet are usually super early, and you have to apply before even you have applied or got admitted to any school. So that's something to consider. I think it's always good to denote scholarship options when you're making your Excel file. And as I said, I will show you the Excel file. Don't worry, it's not privileged information. That's pretty much it.
I think Ataberk mentioned most of it. He made a very good summary. I will add some little things. So I think, as far as I know, after the 2008 crisis, fundings were severely cut. So back in the times, in the good times, universities were offering more grants, more scholarships. But after 2008, the fundings were cut. Well, I got a merit scholarship from Bocconi and a number of other universities, but I chose Bocconi because it was the best. And it was, I really liked the program as well, apart from the academic faculty and stuff. And the thing with Jean Monnet is Jean Monnet only covers 1 year master's programs. So if you're gonna apply for a 2 years master's program, then you can't say, yeah, I will fund the other year. Let Jean Monnet fund the first year. They say, no, we only give you funding for 1 year's master's programs. And people usually use Jean Monnet to apply for masters in the UK because in most other countries, masters are for 2 years. There are some 1 year masters in the Netherlands, and mostly in the UK. So a lot of most of the people who got Jean Monnet want the LSE, for instance. But right now, because of the Brexit, it's a bit of a risky situation because there's the Jean Monnet booklet says that, you know, if you go into a master's in the UK and UK gets out of the EU, then you might have to pay for the master's with interest. So, I mean, I wouldn't risk it personally. I personally didn't apply to LSE because it's an expensive program, and it's about maybe £30,000 plus living in London. And I heard the situation about Jean Monnet, so I didn't even bother to apply to LSE, for instance. In the UK, it's especially difficult to find funding, and I think Deniz and Burak will talk more about this. You know, in Britain, there is just scholarships just don't exist. I don't know of many universities that offer scholarships. It's very limited. And that scholarship, I think you need to pay for half of it later. Am I right? I think, yeah, I think it's half of the grant is for free, but half of it you need to pay later, I think. So these are the things.
Really cheap though. You can consider Germany if you're low on financial resources. It's quite cheap there.
Because Germany is a cheaper country, and also you don't pay tuition. And also in France is more expensive, but again, there's no tuition for public universities. Naturally, in Italy and Spain, you also pay for public universities. Not as much as private universities, but you pay about like maybe 1,000 or 2,000 euros per semester. Keeping that in mind. And yeah, these are the things I would like to say.
All right, Burcu, before moving on to the application process, I just have one more question to ask. And that is, like, you talked about your research experience as a research assistant. My first question is, like, how can we actually become a research assistant? Like, did you approach your professors in the first place? Like, how do you become a research assistant? Like, that's my first question. I know it sounds silly, but I think, like, I had that question in mind as well. So I assume some people might as well have it. And the second question is, like, would having no research experience, let's say in your four years of like studying, would be a negative thing for me, let's say, because I only had like private sector internships and experience? In that case, would that be a downside for my application?
I can start if you want, because let's say, as I said, the most fundamental aspect of your application is your GPA. That's like, the other things will, let's say, if your GPA is not, let's say it's super far away from the required threshold, you will just become you will get eliminated. So that's the first and foremost priority is always your GPA. How I found my research assistantship, I pretty much I was like an illness for Rafet Hoca. I literally mentioned it every time we, let's say, met with each other or saw each other. And this process went on for 1 year. Then he established, let's say, his crew of research assistants, and I became a part of it. That's how it went. But yes, I did approach. And for my case, like at least for Cansu, our cohort, to 2020 cohort, the availability of research, doing research while you're an undergrad, doing teaching assistantship was way lower for our cohort. You do have more options now, and I'm actually quite jealous of the later cohorts for this. But yeah, this is how I found it. And research, will it matter? It helped for my case because, as I said, I was let's say, Refshat Hoca told me that I'm kind of a gamble when it comes to a master's program, because when you look at my transcript and my CGPA, I don't come out as let's say, a student that will likely succeed. Keep in mind that the worst scenario of a school, for a school, is admitting a student and them dropping out at will, or they not being able to finish the program. It's just resources went away to garbage. So they never want that, and they want safe and secure students. So in my case, yes, it did help. If you have strong GPA, it might help, but it may not as well. Like if you have a good GPA, let's say 3.8, 3.9, what do you think they are going to say? How many applicants will have a GPA above 3.8? So yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I also don't think a research assistantship is a must to go into a master's, because it's actually rare in Europe to get a research assistantship in an undergraduate degree. We can have it in Bilkent. Right now, you have a lot of options. Back in our time, it wasn't as many, but you could. But in the US, you can do it. I'm not sure about economic students, but I know lots of engineering students who in the United States who did their undergraduate in the United States and participated in the research projects. But it's actually rare in Europe to have some research experience in your undergraduate. So I don't think it's essential. Like I had a good GPA myself. I didn't have a problem with that. I graduated as the top of my class. So I don't think that particularly being a research assistantship, I don't think that in particular a research assistantships helped me. Maybe it helped me with the funding, because as I told you, it's difficult to get funding, and anything helps when you need that. But other than that, I don't think it's truly essential. And how I got my research, I didn't do anything special to get it. Refet Hoca approached me. He said, I had this project. I told a few, would you like the help? And I said, why not? I had this offer. So I accepted. And that's how it worked for me.
Before we move on, I think for research assistantships, since we are going to close this topic, I want to make this really important comment. At least I think that it's quite important. It does help when you, let's say, compile a profile. Let's say you have 3 internships in 3 outrageously different areas. You have a research assistantship for 2 months, and then you did a TA-ship in another area in a irrelevant area. Let's say you became an assistant in sociology department. Let's say these will help, but what really helps is to build a specific character, at least when you're applying as your general file. For me, I used an internship in İş Bankası and being an array of Refet Hoca, and having my Erasmus term in a finance masters in edX, to compile a profile which screams, oh, I do know more monetary and financial economics than most of your applicants. It's pretty much like it's really unlikely that you will have someone with more knowledge of that. And I use that to my favor. But that's pretty much, I think that's what made them unsee my terrible GPA. But yeah, they do have a bigger impact when you compile a profile. I'm not saying they won't help, but they will work even more efficiently. It's increasing returns to scale if you compile a profile.
And also it shows that you have an academic orientation. So that's basically it.
Burcu, would you like to continue with the application process, like the first question?
Sure. What do you think is the importance of the references that you get?
I can start. So here's the first rule. Any reference letter doesn't work. That's a top rule. The more the professor knows about you, the better that reference letter is gonna be. So just because you, let's say there's this one alternative reality that you've met with Daron Hoca and you've made him accept writing a reference letter to you. We're talking about the fourth most quoted economist throughout the entire history of economics. If he writes, I know him, he's a good, he might do well, it's good if you accept him to your program. It probably will not help as someone, let's say, very young, just has few major publications. But if he writes or she writes something that explains he had this task, he completed it with success, he has this character, he had this experience. I do remember one time this happened and he solved it by doing this. The more detail they give, better the reference letter it is. And this is independent from who's writing the reference letter. I think that's the first and foremost rule. And for the other parts, yes, they matter a lot, but you will have certain limitations on how many reference letters you can provide to school. And professors may accept to write a definite number of reference letters, because consider that many of people are applying to schools, and if everybody's applying to the same school, then it's just cutting each other's career path before you even get admitted. So it's good to have, let's say, 3, 4 professors that will accept to write a reference letter. Also, let's say for specific schools, you may want to use reference from an area which the school specializes in. For example, you want to study econometrics, and I think schools in Netherlands are really good at econometrics. Then a reference letter from Javit Hoca or Fatma Hoca may help more. You always want to, let's say, create a profile that will be desired by the school. Let's say you want to go to TSE, then I know how much, let's say, a pure macroeconomist would help. Probably Emin Hoca's reference letter would help you way more. And the third rule of thumb is, to be honest, there are extreme cases where the student is really, let's say, signaling bad, doesn't have a good signal. But if the professor, let's say, accepts the gamble and writes a reference letter of his life, you can get admitted to any school. But keep in mind that this is really low chances, like really low chances, because when a professor is writing a reference letter, what they have in mind is this: I'm trying to support the student, but if my reference is bullshit, then that professor will not be able to support any students for the rest of his life for that particular school. And it has happened in Bilkent as well. I'm not going to give out details, but for a professor, it's a risk to write you a reference letter. And the better stuff, more stuff they put in, more risk they are taking. So you should always consider that in your mind. I think that's the general guideline in a nutshell.
Ataberk, can I ask you a question before like Cansu explains? You said there are in some I think it was in some universities, there is a limit to the number of references that you can submit, right? Does that depend on the university, or is there like one uniform number?
It depends on the university. Some universities don't even accept reference letters. Guess which university? Bocconi doesn't accept any reference letters. So you may not be even able to provide them. I know that Paris School of Economics requires minimum 3. Usually it's 2 reference letters minimum. And then they let you put additional letters of reference. But yes, it does depend on school, and you should, when you're compiling your Excel document, you should indicate how many reference letters they are asking for.
Cansu, can you please
My turn.
explain your case? Yeah.
Actually, Ataberk explained most of it. I would again add some things. And in Italy, so it's customary to make students go through an interview. So that's why I think that's why many of the Italian universities don't ask for reference letters, because they want to see for themselves, I think, what the student is like. So I applied to 2 universities in Italy. One, I had a live interview. For Bocconi, I did a video interview. I uploaded a video. So it's a bit different in Italy. The customary number is 2. They usually ask for 2 references, and some schools let you upload more. Oxford asks for 3, and Cambridge asks for 2. That's what I remember. And I think, like Ataberk says, it's important. It's not that important who gives you the reference letter, but what he writes in it, what he or she writes in that letter. Because if it's a standard letter, then it's not gonna get you anywhere. It should be really detailed, specific. It's good, and that's one thing where research assistantships helps, because if you're a research assistant to a professor, then he can write a good letter to you because he or she knows you, and they can add details that can help you get into that specific university. And another thing I would like to say, the reference letter is really what differentiates you from other candidates, because there might be someone that is similar to your profile, because a GPA or a transcript, it's not something very personalized, I would say. Like there can be someone who has a similar, who has a GPA that's close to you, someone with a TOEFL score close to yours, or a GRE score close to yours, maybe that someone that took similar courses. In that case, what you have is the motivational letter and the letter of reference. But the motivational letter, in the end, you know, what you're gonna write is the content is not very negotiable, because, you know, the format changes, but the content, you know, you explain, we will talk about this later on, but you don't, that's not a philosophy essay or a piece of art. You know, it's, you know, the content is standard basically. So what differentiates you from other candidates in that case, that will be the reference letter. That's why the reference letter is important.
Thank you.
Okay, I have, of course, one more question on that as well. So from my understanding is that the professor and the subject relationship, at least for the program that you're applying, is really important. And also it doesn't matter maybe that much like the grade that you got from that course, but how much the professor knows you. Of course, we're going to talk about the timeline later on in the presentation, but by what time should we at least have a reference letter, or at least approach the professor? Like by what time should we decide, oh, I might actually talk to this professor in order to get a reference letter, and when should I have it completed?
As soon as possible. As soon as possible.
I approached them about like September, October, I think, last year.
The minute school starts, we should approach our professors. Is that the case? Okay.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
I did it in August, and you won't have the chance for two reasons. School is closed, and we are in August actually. But yeah, it should be as soon as possible, and you should let them know about the earliest deadline. And you may have to remind them, because you won't be the only person that they are going to write a reference letter to.
You should track it, definitely. They can end up forgetting, or, you know, there can be problems. I know of a story, so I mean, you need to be a bit careful about these. And one problem is, like, if someone asks before you ask a reference letter, then they might say, I'm writing for someone else for that school, and I won't be able to write a reference letter. So that's a problem. So that's why it's important to approach early.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think what we're going to ask is about actually motivation letter, which Cansu, you were already starting to talk about, but what should we pay attention while writing our motivation letter in order to at least differentiate ourselves or clearly express what we are aiming for in a master's?
Okay, I see two main things go into a motivational letter. Like the first is why I want to study here, like what I'm planning to do later on. Am I planning to go into a PhD, or am I planning to go into some company? Like, what are my long-term plans, and why I think that this school will get me into that. And the second thing is, like, why am I an eligible candidate for this? Why would you take me in? Like, what differentiates me from other candidates, or like, what can I contribute if I come into this master's? I think that's basically these 2 points. You need to cover them. There are thousands of templates on the internet. You can get help also from professors and show them maybe a draft and say, what do you think about these? Like, you know, the shape might change, but, you know, if you have these two things essentially, and that's a good motivational letter.
Cansu summed it up really well. I just want to add one more bit of information. What happens in the motivational letter or statement of purpose? Let's say I'm more accustomed to the term statement of purpose, SOP. So I'm going to use that term. For a SOP, you usually do this before this, let's say, turmoil of applications begin. You make a draft, and the draft does differ. And actually, I would show you mine. But if all of you have the same format, then you will get in the way of each other. And this is to help you, not to undermine you. So I won't do that. But what you do is, let's say in my case, the first paragraph is like, I try to come out as a interesting candidate. And then in the two following paragraphs, I explain what I did in my university, both curricular and extracurricular. And in the last paragraph, uh, I mentioned why I wanted to be in that school. And so what you do is your first, let's say, the material that's, let's say, the 3-4 paragraphs where you explain yourself and what you did is pretty standard, and you keep it as a document. For every school you're applying to, you will modify the last paragraph. And what you want to have in those is why you chose that school. Are there any interesting things you know about that school? And this is for this. Schools know that you're applying to 5, 6, 10, 15 places. So you want to show that I want to come to your program. I'm willing to come to your specific program. So you mentioned, let's say, for Toulouse, I know your expertise in microeconomics. For, let's say, for Semfi, I know your expertise in monetary economics. And then you list the reasons specific to that school on why you want to go in there. That's pretty much the format. So what you do is you prepare that draft as soon as possible, and then you prepare the SOPs for every school before you actually apply. You do the research and you prepare the SOP for that school. And when the time comes to apply for applications to schools, you have all of your statement of purposes ready, and you just attach it to your application. That is the, let's say, ideal case where you're fully prepared.
Like, one piece of advice I want to give: don't go too much into reading other people's letters, because then your letter would lack originality. And it's one of the most important things, a bit original, at least in the wording. Maybe not the content. Okay, people may be writing similar things, but your style should be original at least. So don't read too many letters.
And actually, that's a really good point. I keep in mind that in an application for an academic master's program, what they will look is your transcript and GPA and reference letters. For economics masters, somehow, compared to the other master's programs in other departments, the SOP is not super important. For many of the other departments, it's super important, but in economics, it's just an extra thing. So do not stress about, oh, if I write this wrong, I'm not going to get in. No, if you are able to get in, maybe you'll lose a small percent of change. I don't mean like you don't have to spend time on it, but do not over stress about how good it is. Because as I said, it's not a make it or break it aspect of your application, I would say. At least that's what I've heard.
You can use it maybe as a way to explain some things that, for instance, maybe your GPA is low, or maybe there's a problem in your transcript about some course, and maybe you can explain these in the motivational letter, and that might help in your application. That's one thing that helps. Other than that, like Ataberk said, it doesn't, it's not as important as it is in the other programs, in economics masters, academic masters.
What Cansu said is super important, by the way. I think the statement of purpose, if you don't have a, let's say, lower GPA than average, and I did, it is the one place where you can explain the reasons why. So use it wisely if you know that you're an average or below average student. It will have more importance compared to other applicants with, let's say, stronger GPAs and transcripts.
Thank you. And what can you say about the examinations that you took before applying to a master's degree?
Yeah, like GRE, GMAT, and also like the English exams as well, like the language assessment exams.
Exactly.
Okay, I can start with that. So I took you need to take an English exam, but for some universities you don't have to, because you can say, at Bilkent the language of instruction is English, and they accept that if you show if you show in your transcript or in your if you show some document. But some universities want you to, like, especially I think all universities in the United Kingdom want you to submit some certificate of English. I took IELTS, And later on, I took TOEFL as well, but because some universities didn't accept IELTS, but it turned out unnecessary because I got into Bocconi, so I took some exam in Wayne. But like, I think TOEFL is more accepted all around the world, and more. There isn't an university I know that doesn't accept TOEFL, but some universities don't accept IELTS, so you can go for TOEFL in that case. And for economics masters, you need to go for GRE. GMAT is mostly for management and finance masters. And for, I think in all other areas, you need to take the GRE. And I wouldn't be able to talk much about the GMAT because I haven't taken it and I don't know much about it. I think Burak took it to go into Oxford Finance and he will talk about it. He knows GMAT well. And I can talk about GRE myself. There's the writing section and there is a quantitative section and there's a verbal section. And someone who went through the Turkish education system won't have a problem with the quantitative section. That's what I think. For the verbal section, I don't think the paragraph questions are difficult. What is problematic is the vocabulary part. You need to learn vocabulary because there's a long list of words. You know, I was familiar with Latin roots and stuff, but still it's a lot of, how do you say? Like you need to revise and go through the words if you need a good verbal score. Most universities don't care, actually, to be honest, about the verbal score. They only look at quant, or they say, yeah, you need to get about 150 in GRE verbal, but 150 you will do. Don't worry about that. But I think most universities in the UK, like Oxbridge, LSE, they want you to also have a proper-ish, like GRE verbal score, and that's why I brushed up on that a bit. And yeah, that's it.
I didn't take IELTS. I took TOEFL, and actually, since every place in metropolitan cities of Turkey were held, I went to Adana just to take my TOEFL. Yes, there's a funny story. I can tell it later if you have time. But I took TOEFL. I took GRE twice because in the first one I got sick, so my quantitative score came out real low. And fun fact, you actually know your quantitative and verbal scores as soon as you finish your exam. In Ankara, you take it in American culture. It's in Jinnah, Jinnah Yokuşu, Jinnah Street. Yeah. Yeah, you do take it in there, I think. What's the maximum score in GRE? I think it's 170. Is it 170? Yeah.
170.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and the minimum score is 130. And what the exam will do is, it's every section has, with the exception of writing, no, it does have two sections as well. When you finish your first section, the system will try to bring you closer to the average. If you did really well in your first section, you will have harder questions on your second section. And if you did, let's say, bad in your first section, this questions on second section will be easier. So actually, like in my first one, as soon as I saw easier questions, I was like, oh, God damn it, no, I'm going to fail this one. So actually, I knew that I had to take it again before I even got done with the exam. What Cansu said holds mostly true. I didn't, like most of the applicants, just try to answer the questions in the verbal section, and that's it. Most of the applicants really don't give a damn, nor the universities give a damn about your verbal score, nor your writing. There are actually some people who only take quantitative, so they will skip the entire section, and it's really common. And you will become envious of them when you're in the testing center. For quantitative, it depends, but let's say as a proper economics student or graduate, it's good to have a score at least about 159, 160 at least. And this at least doesn't mean what was mine, I won't say. Honestly, I don't share my scores because it does depend. So yeah, you should aim for at least 160. It's good if it's above 165, and when we say it's good, I mean try for that. If you can take it again, if you're below 160, definitely take it again. If you're between 160 and 165, if you're not applying to a top tier school, it can do the job, or it might not. If you're applying to a top school, yeah, it should be around 165 or more.
Yes,
For a PhD in US, it should be even higher, but we are not going to go into that topic.
it's what Ataberk said is true. Like some people don't even take the verbal section; they just pass it and do the quant. But like I wanted to try my chances with the UK. Like I got into Oxford but couldn't find funding. But I think my verbal score was enough to get into Oxford. They had a threshold for that. I passed it. But again, like if you're not aiming for UK, you probably don't need some verbal score. Just something above 150 would get you through all schools.
Actually, Refet Hoca told me that if two applicants' GRE quant scores are the same, then they look at the verbal.
But I think
when
after
I say
like
then,
everything, after GPA, transcripts, TOEFL, whatever, after all that, they might do that, I think.
exactly, like it's a last resort. It's like when they try to find one little differentiating aspect of two applicants. And I think like for economics departments, I had a really good TOEFL score. If Cansu shares first, I will share. Anyways, I'm not pressuring you, but it was pretty good. So I didn't really, I don't really think that they were like, oh, the verbal score of this guy is really low. What we shouldn't admit it. No, when you look at the TOEFL and you see that the applicant has 4 years of full English education, it does the job. Probably the students that are coming from that country don't have an English as good as you. Usually that's the case because it's super common in Europe to do your undergraduate in your own mother tongue. So yeah, you actually even shine when you go there, even if you're an average student.
Ataberk, can you answer? Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, like, can you answer the question in the chat section, like, or Burcu, were you gonna say we're gonna talk about the timeline later?
Yes, actually, we were supposed to take questions after we're done with our regular ones, so maybe we can hold off on that.
Yeah, but we're gonna talk about like the timeline, like when we should apply for start taking GREs and stuff, like what is the deadline for all those things at the end. So
I think pretty much that, isn't it? Like we are going to talk about the timeline, I think, now, and then it will be Q&A, if I remember correctly.
Let me see. Yeah, that's actually right. Yeah, you got that right at the back. Yeah. Can I ask one more thing about GRE at least before moving on to the timeline? For GRE, so you're basically saying that it's kind of like a end English exam as well. It's like a threshold that you have to fulfill, requirement, when they are not able to decide like which applicant to choose. In that case, maybe they will look at your GRE score. Is that so?
No. Quantitative score is important. Like what the Ataberk said was that if two candidates are too similar, then they might look at the verbal score to differentiate. But that's a very rare situation, I think, because the reference letters can't be same, right? So, I mean, that's a very, very last resort, I think. But GRE is important because, like, it's a uniform exam. It's like ALES that you would take if you want to go do a master's in Turkey. So this is this uniform thing where you can really compare people, because GPA and transcript, who knows what people do in other universities. So that's a bit problematic. But with GRE, you can say, yeah, this guy has good grades, and also he has a good GRE score, so which means that he's actually capable. So they really add up to each other. Like so.
Like, did you have to, or do you think we should study in advance for GREs? At least see the type of questions, like take some tests prior to taking the GRE and stuff. Like, do you think it needs a extra preparation period for taking the test?
Well, ETS offers you 2 free tests. When you enroll for the GRE test, they give you 2 free tests. And you can find also some tests online, I think. But you don't have to go around doing like tens of tests. But, you know, it's good to see the type of questions. And, you know, maybe to speed up a bit. Because the time might be a problem. If there's some difficult question by chance, and maybe sometimes you just lose time and you can't keep track of time, and you might end up not doing as many questions as you wanted to. So it's good to do some practice tests to learn how to organize your time. But again, don't go crazy. Just do the tests that ETS gives you, and maybe some extra if you want. And I think that will be pretty much it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
did some extra ones. When you Google ETS prep tests, not ETS, GRE prep tests, some options will be available. And what you do is, of course, you don't buy the original books because they're too expensive. You go to Olgunlar and you look for those books in illegal format. That's at least what I did.
Ataberk, these are
This
being
is recorded.
recorded. Just yeah,
Yes, yes,
just saying.
they are recorded,
Cool.
and
Just
they will
doesn't
be
care.
distributed privately. Yeah, what they are going to do. I didn't say I bought them. I said I found them. If lawyers are looking, they may have a great chat with me on that topic. But they are available in Olgunlar. Um, and for TOEFL, I think we didn't talk about TOEFL, but your English level is pretty much enough to fulfill any threshold any school might have. You just need to be familiar with the format of the exam. And there are, I think I found 2 CDs on Olgunlar, which was like a virtual test. I did those two. I literally took 15 minutes to look at a site for TOEFL. That was it. And I pretty much got like the high score available in pretty much every section. So, and it's not my success. Bilkent is more than enough to get a good score on TOEFL.
Okay, then I guess if that's all, we should talk about the timeline, right, Burcu? Should we now? I suppose. Okay.
Yes, I guess.
So, like, what is the timeline for the application process? Let's say, let's suppose that I think like most of us are either third-year students or now going into their fourth year. So, like, when should we start preparing for our applications or have some universities in mind? Let's say that we are in June now and we want to do all the application process. Like, what is the deadline for the language assessment test, GREs, references, and all those?
It's good to, I can start because I do have that infamous Excel file, which I'm going to share now. So this is super standard for any, do you see the screen? I hope you do, okay. So this is pretty much what every applicant does. And this, if you're going to remember one thing from this entire webinar, remember this. You need to have an Excel file which has all the information, all necessary information and links in one place. You won't be able to remember them all. And this is pretty much the first advice any professor will give you. You write which school you're applying to, you write which program it is, you write its deadline, and then you list what's important or what stands out from that school. So application fee. Ah, yes, we didn't talk about it. There are application fees for some of the schools, and you do need to. For most schools, you do need to pay an amount. For Bocconi, I think it was 60 euros.
No, it was 100. It was 100.
That's where my internship money went then. And I also wrote the rank, which is totally something that I care about and pretty much nobody ever does. Word of mouth is way more important in my experience. Tuition fee, if there's any. You can see that I didn't even apply to these 3 because of the tuition fee. If there are scholarships available, number, amount, any kind of, really concise information you can put. Placement, if available. It's not common nowadays to find placement data as, let's say, common as it was because of the personal data protection laws and stuff. Now the schools do not release like super detailed lists of their placements. Do they ask for a CV? And this will be yes for every school. Every school asks for a CV. TOEFL threshold, GRE threshold. Some do not. Letter of recommendations they ask if they have a minimum GPA requirement, if they mention anything in verbally, and their application link. And this is pretty much what everyone does if they're applying to a vast number of schools. And for the general deadline, you should have your exams as soon as possible. The CV, definitely, it's one of the first things to prepare for. Your SOP drafts ready. But to be honest, there was cases like I applied to one of these schools 2 days after I received my GRE. So my official score wasn't even ready. And I think it can be Bocconi. I don't really remember. But the obvious answer is it should be ready before the deadline. The better answer would be it should be ready as soon as possible so that you can apply all of them in a peace of mind, because it takes way longer than what you think it will take.
Ataberk, when did you take your GREs, like the two of the GREs that you took?
One in August, I believe, last 1 year ago, and one in January.
Okay. So in our case, like between those months, we can still take the GREs and there is no problem with that, right?
Yeah. But
It just has to
I
be before the
UK
application.
UK has earlier deadlines.
Okay.
I didn't apply to UK, but I
Depends.
think so.
In UK, it depends actually. Cambridge has an early application round, but Oxford, for instance, you can apply until January. There is no early application. So it really depends on the school in UK.
Cansu?
Shall I go? Okay. Well, actually, I wasn't as organized as Ataberk, so he really did a good job on that. I was gonna say, like, if you want to apply for a master's in Europe, I think you should make your mind up about like the spring semester of your third year, because you need to book an exam. Like sometimes you may end up not finding any spots. Like like Ataberk has an experience with that. I booked my tests early, so I took all of them in Ankara. I didn't have a problem with that one. But and the thing is, for TOEFL or IELTS, you won't have to study. Like Ataberk said, I also took the TOEFL without any preparation. I took like a score close to full. But like for GRE, you need to get some more experience about the structure, the timing and stuff. You need more practice. So you should allow yourself some time to practice for GRE. For English tests, not much really. Like, if you don't feel confident about the English test, you can like took some practice tests. But again, for GRE, make up some time. For English tests, maybe a week or two. That will be enough for you, even if you don't feel confident about your abilities. But take them about, I would say, take them during the summer if you feel ready. If not, in about September, so that you can have time to retake an exam if you're not happy with your score. Because if you just take your exam in November, then bye. If you have a bad score, then you can't renew it. Like I took the GRE once, I was happy with my score, but sometimes things happen. Sometimes you have a headache, you're sick, and things don't go well. You get nervous, whatever. It can happen. So just allow yourself some space for errors. And it's an expensive exam, so I mean, don't kill your chances. Like if you don't feel ready, don't take the GRE too early, because it's I think $255 a GRE test.
Yes, I think that's
so that's the main problem. Like you can't say, yeah, I'll take it again. So don't blow it. Like if you're gonna take it, make sure that you're prepared for it.
Okay, I have a question, Cansu. Like, when did you take your GRE tests and also like TOEFL exam? And the second one is that, let's say that I'm gonna have my first GRE test in September, let's say, and I'm not satisfied with my grade. When is the next time that I can take it? Like, can I take it once a month if I have the money? Like, is there a, I don't know, procedure in that as well?
All right, I took my GRE in late September. I took IELTS a bit earlier than that. Then I took TOEFL in February, because some schools I applied to didn't accept IELTS. You can turn in your English certificate later on. You don't have to submit your English certificate at the time of application. GRE, I think you have to, usually. Sometimes they can make exceptions, but for GRE, you should have a GRE score at hand. But for English exams, you can do it like maybe until summer with some schools. And you ask, when should I take when can I take it again?
Exactly. Like, does there have to be like, you have to take it 20 days later after your like first, let's say, test?
I think
Yes.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks.
2
okay.
or 3. It's available on ETS's website,
There
and
has to be
there's a
some time between.
total number of tests you can take in a year, but hopefully you won't have to consider that limit. And it's really something I realized we didn't mention. if you have been paying attention, you should have realized that you need to allocate some financial resources during and before your applications, because those applications take you have to pay for them, and the tests are unfortunately quite expensive, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a smaller financial burden anytime soon. So yeah, you do have some resources prepared beforehand. And when it comes to GRE, some schools say GRE optional. What it means is submit your GRE. Optional means submit when it comes to GRE. So yeah, but all of the offers are conditional on that. By the time that next your program starts, you will have to fulfill your English requirements, and you will have to get a diploma. And this holds for every school on the planet, pretty much. So.
Okay. And
But
you also
for
said that,
you,
oh, sorry.
for you guys, it might change because of Corona, because some schools are like taking off the GRE requirements because they don't, I think some universities don't trust the home GRE. So they are just keeping it down for a while. Maybe I think you most probably will have to take the GRE, but maybe for your generation, it might be a little different. So we'll see.
Okay, and you also said like it depends on the availability, right? If there is no room for me to take, like by room I mean like if I'm not able to reserve a place to take the GRE, or if it's full, in that case that's going to be a problem. So I have to book it in advance.
Yes, book in advance.
Okay.
If you're ready to travel across Turkey, you can book it anytime. I've done it. You can done it, but don't
Also,
do it. It's quite expensive.
One more question is that I know that it's expensive to take the GREs. Do you have to pay an additional fee to send it to universities as well?
Well, I think to 5 universities you can send it for free, or 4.
Okay.
When you're taking the exam, though.
Yes,
that offer
exactly.
holds at the end of your exam. You learn your score, and then you say, these are the universities I want to send it to. After that, I think it's $25 something
It's
dollars
like
for each.
$25.
So it's
Maybe
a
more
number,
expensive.
right? It's a 2-digit number for sure, though, right?
For sure,
Yes,
for sure.
it's 2-digit. Yes.
Okay.
And it's not 10. So it's quite a bit of money when you consider like sending it to 5 schools. But the schools usually take your printout from ETS, and if you don't get admitted, you won't have to send the original one. If you have to get, if you choose your school, you will only have to send one. So it's a really small burden when you think about all of the other aspects of your application.
Okay, so it's good to know at least the university that we're gonna send our GREs to before taking the exam, at least. Okay.
I think it was
Okay,
4. Yeah,
so-
to 4 schools you can send at the end of the exam without any fee. But later that it's a 2-digit sending fee. For some reason, it's an electronic document, but they charge so much. No one knows. But keep in mind.
Okay, so if Cansu and Ataberk is willing, maybe we can have like a short Q&A session before we finish. You guys okay with that? Cool. Okay, so maybe we can allow the participants to unmute themselves, or we can do this via chat. What do you say? Cool
They
either
should
way.
be able to unmute themselves on will.
Really?
And
We didn't block that?
no, your dictatorial aims were demolished before
No.
the meeting even began.
How can I undo that though? Okay, just raise your hand if you want to speak, or just like type it in chat and I'll unmute you. I guess that's how it works. I don't know.
Can you unmute
or-
yourselves?
Ask to unmute.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, we can.
Here you go, John.
Of course, Can unmuted himself first. Naya Gatimova.
Okay,
So,
John, go
can
ahead
I
first.
ask the first question? Okay. So about the transcripts, like you talked about how obviously the content of the transcript is important, especially for the type of the school you want to go. But what I'm going to ask is like, what about the order of the classes that you take in the transcripts? Like, do you have a preferences of order? Like, you should take these type of classes in the 3rd year and in the 4th year, and leave the other stupid classes in the first 2 years, or it doesn't matter as you take all of the classes, like the order doesn't matter, like which one is true for you.
Well, I think the order doesn't matter, but some classes come in a sequence. Like as I said, for instance, abstract, then advanced calculus, then real analysis, then financial mathematics. So, and these are prerequisites of, and these are the prerequisites. So you will have to take these courses. You need to take them in that sequence. But other than that, I don't think there will be any problem in economics electives, for instance, whether you took them in the 3rd or the 4th grade. It wouldn't cause a problem. But one thing is, when you're applying in the you're applying in the fall semester of your last year, so the courses you will take in your last spring semester, they won't be seen naturally, and the grades of the courses that you're taking in your fall semester won't be seen. So you might have to, if you want your grade to be seen in a particular course, you may want to take it in the 3rd grade or maybe earlier if you can. So that's the advice I can give on that.
So said everything there is to know. I'm not gonna comment.
Thank you very much.
One sec. Okay, I'm gonna unmute. Oh my god, I lost it. Okay, I found it.
I unmuted it.
Oh, you did? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna mute myself.
Can you please go ahead and ask your question?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what do you think about it? What kind of drawbacks could being irregular have on applying masters? Or is it more like, is it better to be irregular because you will have more time, or do universities consider you're irregular or not irregular? You waited for 6 months for applying to university. Yeah, that was my question.
I think both of us are regular students, so we don't have on-hand experience on that. But the rule of thumb is make sure what you need to prepare is before the deadline. As long as you follow that rule of thumb, you should be okay. I don't think that anyone will go, oh, this student took 1.5 years to finish the preparatory classes, demolish him or her. I don't think it will be very likely. So as soon as you're ready when you need to be, it's okay.
I mean, for example, I have to wait for 6 months so there will be 6 months gap between masters and undergraduate. So would that matter for, like, in terms of studying and from the point of view of university?
But you would still have to wait for 6 months even when you're regular, so it doesn't make a difference in the perspective of the university. I don't think they will say, yeah, the student is having a gap 6 months and we shouldn't take him or her. I don't think it would really matter. Like, maybe you can say, yeah, I'm planning to do this in my gap, I'm planning to do an internship to sound a bit more like sophisticated, maybe, I don't know. And I think that would be it.
Hope so. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
I am speaking, right?
You are.
Okay. Can you comment on the following sentence? Since I was rejected from all the European or foreign schools, I have decided to apply to Bilkent.
Did you hear?
Can
you repeat it? I think they didn't hear you.
You couldn't hear me?
I suppose, yeah.
No.
Okay, I repeat. I would like you to comment on the following sentence. Since I was rejected from all the foreign universities or European schools, I have decided to apply to Bilkent University for master's.
Like an exam question, but I don't think it's easier to get into Bilkent masters if you couldn't get into a master's in Europe. I don't think it's easier. So that wouldn't be a nice statement, because that statement would fail in the end, because you wouldn't get into Bilkent as well. So
By the way, never talk about where you got rejected from in your SOP or any interview or something like that. What you do is you try to hide your flaws and you try to accentuate your strength. Uh, I can comment on this case because I do have several rejections, and there are more than many, I can assure you. Um, I got into Bilkent actually, but there's a really big time gap between the European deadlines and when Bilkent takes you into interview. At least in my case, my interview was like a month ago, and like there is that's a huge time gap because while you're studying your last semester, you do have a slight knowledge of where you're accepted and where you get rejected. I think what Jansu said is holds true because to be honest, Bilkent's master program gives you more resources than any other university, even Bocconi, because you don't get a stipend that big anywhere in Europe. It's not something common, and the classes are definitely, from what I've heard, not easier. So I think when you're trying to, let's say, if Bilkent is in your calendar, you should hold it as an equal to the other schools and not as an inferior option.
I ask because there is some kind of perception. People think that we should first apply to European schools as a B plan, then we should consider students in schools in Turkey. That's the reason. Can there be a student who never wants to apply to European master programs because she thinks that Bilkent offers the most beautiful and most comprehensive program? That's the reason I would like to learn.
I think at some point this is a bit of a personal choice because maybe you want to study in Europe or maybe you want to stay in Turkey with your family or you're happy at Bilkent. I think that's more personal than academic. That's what I would say.
If your question is, I will move to Turkey after if I get rejected from all universities, it may be possible and it may not be possible. But in Turkey, consider that you have to take a language exam. Let's say if you take a TOEFL, it should be in a public university. It's a rule enforced by YÖK, and we have no control over it. And you have to take ALES. Because all schools have a minimum requirement. So applying to Turkey comes with its own, let's say, set of requirements. But if you are done with all of these requirements, yeah, the timing does allow you to switch to Turkey if you get rejected from everywhere. But it doesn't mean that you will apply so many times later. The best strategy is to apply to all of them and maybe consider Turkey after you have a better view of what you're going to do.
Can I add one more thing, or am I stealing time of the other people? I can, right? How did you compare the programs? I mean, did you take as a benchmark? For instance, this is what Bilkent offers. This is the other universities. Most of the programs seems very similar to each other if they are not specifically for econometrics or computational and integrated programs. Pure economics programs seem very similar to each other. How did you decide on that specific program to apply?
Mine was super easy. I looked at their placements to USC PhD programs and their tuition fees. I think that's pretty much it. Mine wasn't a really selective process. I just compiled a list of the top schools and whether I'm fit for them and whether their placements are good. I checked it using, my friends, professors, and alumni. That's pretty much it.
What about you, Cansu?
Well, I took advice from professors. Like I applied to top European schools, and like Hilal said, programs are similar. So I didn't really try to compare programs. So I mean, and I like Bocconi particularly because it was more flexible. They have more electives, much more electives compared to other programs, and also it's a good reputation university, and that's how I decided on Bocconi.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senem, you may go ahead. Yes.
I want to
Gitti.
Bekleyelim bir dakika.
Tam sorarken gitti.
Bir de sormaya devam ediyor. Çok üzüldüm.
I don't know, but what are? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Huh? Okay. I'm repeating again. Which countries and which universities as qualified and also public university? Again, you cannot hear.
No,
I did. To be honest,
I heard, but I didn't understand what you were asking.
Yeah.
What?
Both qualified and public schools in masters.
Qualified and public. Okay.
Did
I
you
think
search
there were-
about it? Like
Yeah,
I
I
know
did.
that Paris School of Economics is a public university and also it's a qualified university. Have you ever searched about it?
Okay.
Some universities in Germany are public and qualified. I think Bonn is a really popular choice. Mannheim is a really popular choice. As a side information, Bonn, I think I've heard that Bonn has the best mathematics department in entire Germany. So they do have a really quantitative based program. And I've heard that it was popular even back when our professors were looking for masters. Mannheim is infamous for its engineering programs. I think Mannheim has that approach, and Heidelberg is known for its. I don't make this a statement. I know the other two. Heidelberg is somewhere that I'm not accustomed to, but luckily Nigar, who is a student of Heidelberg, will come and talk about it, so you can ask her. I think it's a good school as well, more on the social science side of economics. In Netherlands, as I said, all of them are expensive, so you might want to check it with caution. SEMFI in Spain has a really low tuition compared to rest of the programs. I think so around 6,000 euros, but it's 600. In my list, I wrote 6,600 euros per year, but scholarships are available. I think it's a private institution though. I think that's as far as my knowledge goes.
I think Carlos Tercero is also public, and the tuition is similar to that of SEMFI. That's what I remember. But UK, it's mostly private, and Netherlands as well. If you go up to north, like Denmark, Sweden, I think has some good universities, and I think they are public. But the problem is the cost of living in Sweden, of course. If you can get through that, the universities are public. And in France and Germany, like Ataberk mentioned, there are many good public universities and many good private universities as well, like Sciences Po. And, you know. In Germany, I don't know of a good private university, but in France there are. Yeah,
Is LMU private or public?
Where?
LMU, Ludwig Maximilian.
I think it's public. I think it's public.
Yeah. I think in Germany it's super uncommon for people to go to private schools, and
Yes,
you know the country's approach is really, let's say, socialist, not in the democratic sense, but they do care that everything is free or cheap. So
there are some, I think, business schools in Berlin that are private, and that's it. Like most other universities are public.
But I think you have to put a blocked bank account if you want to study in Germany, and that might become a burden. So my advice is do check the visa requirements as well. I didn't do that because some families do allocate funds beforehand. Mine didn't. And when you're applying for visa, it might become a problem. They may ask you to show, let's say, 500 euros for each month when you're going to study. Italy does. We did our application together 6 days ago along with Cansu, and I actually got informed that they require more resources this Monday. Cansu is learning it now as well. So I did to do some financial mumbo jumbo meanwhile. So do check if they want you to get a blocked account, if they want you to show a certain amount of income. These things do matter. Moral of the story is do not leave the financials after you get admitted. It should be one continuous process where you deal with everything.
One other thing about Germany that came to my mind is in Germany you apply pretty much later, like because to other schools you apply about spring or latest winter, but in Germany you apply in spring about March or April. So the thing is, for instance, I didn't apply to any universities in Germany because I got into Bocconi, and then I said, why would I apply? Because I got my funding and stuff, so I didn't care. So this is the one problem with Germany. Like if you want to go to a German university, then you need to turn down other offers, or maybe enroll to 2 schools, but that's technically not legal and not nice, actually, in terms of academic trust issues and stuff. So, I mean, that's one problem with Germany to keep in mind.
If you accept an admission offer and then decline it, it's basically saying F you to the entire department. Don't do that. Don't get yourself isolated from that academic community for the rest of your lives. It doesn't do any good. Please don't do that.
Unless there is something extreme going on, just don't. I mean, it's bad reputation for you, for Bilkent, like for everyone that is gonna apply later than you. So, I mean, for the greater good and for your own goods, rejecting offers after taking it, it's not good.
And your professors as well. Those professors won't be able to send any students to that school if you do that anymore.
They will hate you as well after that.
Yeah, don't make enemies, don't make friends.
I think John has a question as well. John?
Question commenting, like 2 things. I think it is also a bad thing because for example, I think you two have made a list and sent applications like that, but the problem is if you send an application to a lesser university that you will probably get accepted, you are taking somebody's as place that he might have wanted to go into that university, but he couldn't because you got accepted. But then you also got accepted into a better university and you said, sorry, buddy, I'm not going to your university. First, that I would like you to make a comment on that. And second, I think it is hard to study in Germany because I think they have this thing you have to learn German. Du musst sprechen Deutsch, something like that. Because many people complain about that. I will also ask you to comment about that.
Okay, I can comment about the German thing. I think it's compulsory for you to take a German course when you go to Germany. Right now it's problematic because there are no German courses going on because of Corona. But normally you have to start a German course before you start your university degree in Germany. But I mean, I don't think they push you to go C1 in German, ich bin Deutsch kind of thing. I think maybe you would save it with A2. But I mean, if you don't want it, then don't go into it. I think it's not bad to learn German. It's a useful language because, Germany is a rich country and, who knows, maybe you might end up living there, or a language is good. Why not? And if you have time for it, then I would suggest that you take that path. And the other thing you said was, you're taking the place of another student, right? But one problem is this. So in Europe, the application periods are not uniform. So you apply to some school, then that period ends and you apply to some other schools, and the acceptance letters come in very different times. And by the time, for instance, an acceptance letter hasn't come, an offer expires. So you can't really optimize about that. But that's one problem. So in the US, it's uniform. You apply in December, most schools have a deadline of 15th of December, and then your offers come in March or April, not sure. But then, it's all in close times. But in Europe, then you can get an offer in March, and then this other school that you really want to go may send you the acceptance letter in May. And then, but you might say, maybe I'm not going to get into that school in May, so I should take this offer in March. But then you end up getting the offer, and it's so problematic. So you might be taking the place of a student, but you also personally can't really know what to do in that case. So I wouldn't blame anyone for doing that, actually. I didn't have to do that, but I wouldn't blame anyone for doing something like that.
So first of all, Deutsch ist sehr schön. Mega schön. Joking aside, Cansu has both better German than I do and better information about Germany than I do, so I'm not going to comment on that. And the second thing is, John, since we are on a personal basis, I'm going to make this joke. We don't live in US. We don't live in USSR. If you think like that, then you're an inferior applicant by default, because everybody will have safety schools. Let's say, I didn't, but it's an extreme case, and you should have safety schools if you definitely want to go to masters. That's one. Everybody does it, and there's no shame in that. Why there's no shame in that? It's because of this. The universities know that not every offer is going to be accepted. So your offer is already made with what you're asking in mind. So you're not destroying other people's dreams and careers and so on. You can have a clean conscience on that. And yeah, I didn't have any safety schools as well, but for most people they do, and they should. And schools do know it, so nobody gets oppressed by the bourgeois during the application process. And since Iran asked the question a while ago, I think we can jump on.
Yeah, before, I think like, if you want, Burcu, you can like maybe first read Iram's question, but I think like many of you saw that. I would like to add something very similar to that, so you can answer both at the same time. Just like Iram's case, my situation, and I think many people can experience the same as well. When you go to Erasmus in your third year, second semester, you most of the time don't have that many options in terms of electives. And third year is the time that you actually take or start to specify in the field that you want to continue in the future. In my case, Utrecht University didn't have any good or advanced econ courses, so I had to take some courses that I was not actually willing to. In that case, I'm going to have to take the courses that I would like to study in the future this semester or in the spring semester in my last year as well. In that case, like, I assume that's going to be a problem for me because I'm not going to be able to get the right references. In addition to that, it's going to seem as if I took some courses that I didn't care, even let's say I had like good grades or bad grades, but I was not able to specify in the field that I want to continue in the future. So that's my question, which is, I think, similar to Iram's question as well.
So I do feel for you both, because when I went to my Erasmus, I didn't even have any electives. I had 3 classes I can choose from, which I wouldn't take. So they gave me a specific program that I didn't even have any choice. So I do feel for you. First of all, I think you can, first and foremost, you can always make up a story that supports what you come through, and that's not an issue. That's super common. That's the easy answer. The harder answer would be, of course, both Cansu and I don't think, like, at least for my case, I did plan entire courses with that in mind. That's why I went to edX, because I knew that it was in finance and I will be able to draw a specific profile. But I don't think it's a huge problem, because, like it or not, the master's program do have a very specific package they will offer. If it's, let's say, for academia, there's a certain workload that will be fulfilled for every program. Let's say you will know how to take second derivatives by the end of the program. It might be an unnecessary example, but it is the case. So I know both of you on a personal basis. Again, you said I took classes that are not related to macroeconomics. I think that's fine. And as Refet just says, when you graduate, you won't be a macroeconomist or microeconomist. You're going to be an economist. So I would like advise you to not stress over it that much, and you can always make up for it. Like, I've only have one class that I've taken from math department with a really low score. The other one I had to drop it due to Corona and my abilities. It was way harder above my potential. So like, these are just, let's say, the hassle-free let's say, easiest, the utopian scenario. You will have deviations and you will have a way to come, let's say, you will find a way to get over your problems. I don't think it shouldn't be a huge source of stress. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we have time for one last question.
Just before that, Cansu, do you want to add something to the prior question?
Oh, yeah.
Like the issue that EM and I think many other students have as well.
Maybe a little briefly. I also know what I also felt for you what you said about Erasmus, because I also had this problem in Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. 96% of courses are in Catalan and 3% in Spanish and 1% in English. So then you really end up with a small set of electives. So, and people know these things. I think you can even write these in your motivational letters. Like, I didn't have a huge offer set in Erasmus. I couldn't specialize in macro. I actually wanted to specialize in macro. You can briefly mention that and go over that. I don't think, like Ataberk said, I don't think this would cause a huge problem, because in the end, we're just undergraduate economics students and experimenting and learning things. And as long as you explain things properly and state your objectives properly, and then I don't think it would cause a big problem.
Anybody else want to ask a question? Like one last shot?
I'm gonna. Pooja, I know. Okay, one last question. This is coming for Gülce. I'm sorry, Gülce. I gave your name, but for the sake of the question, if we want, because I think I had the similar idea as well, maybe because we didn't find funding, or maybe we are still undecided. If we want to have a gap year before our masters due to any circumstances, would that be a problem? What do you think of that? And that is the last question that I think I'm gonna have.
I did ask that question to some of the professors. What they told me is it may and it may not. It depends on the university and it depends on the rest of your application. They told me that if you definitely want to go to masters, it's best to start it off right after you graduate, and don't take any, let's say, deviate. Sorry. Okay. So I think I asked this question to Refat, and he told me that it depends. I've heard that not only from him, but like from several sources. It's usually best for you to start a master's program right after you graduate if you want to stay in the academia. But there might be additional benefits of, let's say, getting into a job and then resigning from that job just because you want to take masters, because then you're signaling, oh, I just want to do this. I do have a job. I'm not going to use it to go into another career path. And I think gap year would have a similar strategy. If you definitely want to do a PhD after, maybe it's better for you to start off your masters. But as I said, like, this choice will be less dependent on your will and more dependent on your situation. If you can find funding or not, how this pandemic is gonna end. Yeah, it really depends on your situation, I say.
Some universities even have limitations on that. Like, it is specifically said that you should have graduated like at least 2 years ago. Like, I'm sorry, at most 2 years ago. Like, they state these things. So it's also better from an educational perspective, because in 2 years you're gonna like maybe forget like about 50% of what you learned in your undergraduate degree. So a break may not be good. Maybe it might be good psychologically, but educationally you're gonna have problems when you restart. So I think it's better to apply as soon as possible. If you have a personal problem, then you can state it in your application and say, I had this problem, or I had to do this thing. Some people are, for instance, canceling stuff because of Corona right now, and they're saying, yeah, I actually got into this program, but I'm canceling it because of Corona. I can't come, so I'm reapplying. If something extreme happens or something personal, you can always explain it and do it. But in normal circumstances, I would advise for you to apply as soon as possible.
All right, I guess that is our time. I really want to thank you, Cansu and Ataberk, for their time and efforts. Thank you all so much. And I want
you.
to thank you
Not at all. It's a
to
pleasure.
yeah, it was a pleasure to actually come together like this. So I really want to thank you to the students who participated, and just thank you, and be safe. But tomorrow we will have another session at 8 p.m. It will be about masters in Europe specifically, so we hope to see you there tomorrow.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Netherlands and Germany, especially. So anyone who's interested in that should definitely come. Thank you all so much for coming as well again. And sorry if we had any mistakes, and it took pretty long time. I think it's almost 2 hours. So thank you for staying with us for 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for
It
inviting.
Thank you so
probably
much.
wasn't easy.
Thank you for inviting us. If you have any further questions,
We can write your
you can-
emails.
yes, my email is at the chat. Yeah, thank you for your participation and your invitation. It was great. It's always a pleasure to feel like we have not graduated from the camp yet.
I really enjoyed speaking to you, and if you have any further questions, do not hesitate. You can ask me anything. And yeah, so nice to see you guys again as well. After a long break, love you.
Right.
See you guys.
See ya.